Hello and welcome to a new Scale 500 news video here on the channel. This time from slightly different surroundings, but I'm traveling right now. Nonetheless, there are some exciting news coming from Herpa Wings, as they earlier this week had an Instagram live stream. I tried actually watching it live, but had to abandon it because of some technical issues. I don't think it was the responsibility of Herpa, to be honest, but more of Instagram. I couldn't see the live chat, which was a bit annoying, and every 30 seconds it just cut out. So I had to rewatch the whole thing later, but luckily I could do so. And there were some quite interesting points brought up, especially because there were some really brilliant questions coming from the audience. So well done there to you guys. And I would like to, just go through some of these points. And of course, I have, as always, made a comprehensive list with all the different models that were talked about throughout the video. You can find the full list in the video description below, and I will also highlight a few models after we've listened to some of the statements from the Herpa Wings product manager Stefan Kölgen. So let's jump right into it, because he had some good news about models hopefully soon will coming to retailers.
Just wanted some positive news that we are currently starting a larger distribution run. Finally, I mean, it's March, and we all know January, February were pretty slow months in terms of new releases. But now in March, we have a bigger package alone, with not counting the snap-fit models, but just counting the traditional classic 500, 200 scale models. We have, if I remember correctly, 14, 15 items coming in. And we will in the future also, in the next couple of months, be able to catch up a lot.
All right, so 14 to 15 models, scale 500 and 200, no snap fits. I mean, it's good to see them finally getting models into stores again, but it is kind of the annoying story that we have had before, where they had a huge backlog and then suddenly everything bursts into the market at once. It really hurts the wallet of collectors, because let's face it, I don't think most of us would just like to buy like 15 models in one go. It's just getting too expensive for that. Happy that models are coming. At the same time, when we have these huge backlogs and then everything at once, that's also not nice, because it does mean that people will miss out on models, because they can't buy them all at once, and once they then have the money to get the models, they will probably be sold out. So yeah, but there was another topic coming up, and quite interesting, because it is a topic that we have had before. However, his question, or rather his answer, seems to have shifted slightly. The topic was brought up in terms of all white models or albino models, if they could make those so that people can customize their models easier. In the past, Herpa has always said, no, this is not a possibility at all, because they could not do so due to licensing. This time around, however, the answer is slightly different, and I think it is quite interesting. So let's hear what he had to say.
Would you consider any classic models in all white so we can customize?
That's a difficult question, actually. I mean, producing, what is the actual amount of this? I know that in other scales that is done quite often, but what is quite often mean? I know there's some beautiful custom models out there. Saw a few of them in Amsterdam also, and very cool stuff. And of course, if we do a lot of Swiss Air, I think, and Lufthansa, I think that's a very welcome color scheme. But to start doing a range of blank white models just because of that, not sure if there's enough demand for that.
Okay, so we have to, of course, take here into consideration that the question did have kind of the addition of asking about classic models, although he does, in my opinion, answer it quite broadly. I think it's quite interesting. He does acknowledge that it does happen in other scales. He apparently doesn't come to the conclusion that it could mean that there is a demand for it. If it is done in other scales and they continue to do so, I would argue it is because there is a demand. But okay, he doesn't seem to be quite convinced about that. He even kind of acknowledges that many of these Lufthansa, Swiss, maybe Air France models perhaps sell much better than they should do, because they all end up as donor models. Quite funny. But he doesn't go into the whole thing of licensing at all in this answer, which I find is interesting. I didn't make myself very clear before, but I never really bought that argument. So that he doesn't mention it at all here, I think. I don't want to put too much into it because it is a live stream and he might just not have thought of it at the moment. But again, I think it is an interesting answer. But I don't agree with his conclusion that there perhaps isn't a demand for it. It might take away some chunks from some other models that they sell more of at the moment. But I mean, yeah, if we get the 50th CSA A320, no disrespect to CSA or the A320, but when we have had this model so many times and we get another one and another one and another one, those are the models that will be bought, but only because they will end up as donor models. Then the next topic that was brought up, also I think quite interesting to hear his answer here, is actually the EasyJet model that JC Wings released just before Christmas last year, the A321NEO that made a bit of noise in the Scale 500 community, and he was asked about that and to give a statement.
So an interesting question, Stefan. What do you think about JC Wings' launch of an EasyJet A321? Does Herpa have any plans to adapt to future rivals and the EasyJet license? How do you see the issue?
Well, I don't think we have to comment on competition, on competing models. Well, nobody has an EasyJet license, so everything that is out there that's being bought is basically an infringement of rights. We will not adapt to future rivals or competitors in terms of doing unlicensed models. That is something I think we had that last time also. If we start there, we're not going to be here in a few years, and we all want to be in the long run. How do I see the issue? Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, I mean, yeah, again, fair enough that they say they will stick with the licensed products, which I fully understand, and I also kind of agree with. But yeah, I think it was an interesting answer. He didn't say much, but at the same time, reading between the lines is always interesting with the answers that they come up with. Now, the next topic was actually also a brilliant question regarding the health of the Scale 500 market. You know, we quite often hear, Scale 500 is dying, and we hear it, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I hear it quite often from Scale 400 collectors. I've never experienced Scale 500 collectors going to Scale 400 collectors and saying, your hobby is dying. But let's hear what they had to say about the health of the Scale 500 market, how they see it. Then let's have a little chat about it afterwards.
What do you think about the overall health of the Scale 500 market? How do you see the market developing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I would have to pack out my crystal ball a little bit on that. Seeing it I think the 500 scale is quite healthy. Depends on who you ask, of course. If you ask a 400 scale collector, he would say, of course, it's dying down. But we're actually seeing a little bit of a difference that actually models are sold out quicker than they used to be. So we do see a demand, not just stabilizing, but actually growing a little bit. Maybe it has to do with the international reach that we have. I'm not exactly sure, but I think the problem is more that now that we've done our homework on a lot of different issues, and we still have solved a lot of the logistics problems, that we need to get more product onto the market, more variety than we have been able to release in the past couple of months. And after that, I think we'll be quite healthy. As long as you keep on joining us, keep on sending us your ideas, and keep on buying the models, I think the 500 scale will be going on for several years. Hopefully more than 10.
I mean, I think collectors will certainly keep on buying Scale 500 models if you make them affordable again. Now, let me just clarify one point, because I think he even kind of touches upon it. The answer depends on who you ask. And cheekily, maybe not so cheekily, I alluded to the fact that I often get messages from scale 400 collectors judging over scale 500, and I don't really see that happening so much the other way around. It's actually a trend that I don't quite like. It is not to criticize scale 400 collectors in general. I think it's just a shame, because I'd much rather see we all collecting scale models. It doesn't matter which scale it is. I'd much rather see us all support each other than trying to, always put the finger in the wound. But I think it is quite interesting. Of course, the product manager of the biggest company in scale 500 does not want to say the market is dying. But I do think he has a point in the fact that it does look like models are selling out quicker, maybe because we are starved for models. That might be a factor. But he actually had a little bit more to say about that, because he was asked about the scale 400 competition having a lot of companies releasing a lot of models compared to Herpa. And I think that brings in another quite interesting point on this whole topic. So let's just quickly listen to what he had to say about that.
What do you think about the huge number of 400 scale launches from other companies with an interesting variety of brands? How do you try to adapt to such competition?
Well, I mentioned that just a little bit. Our goal is not to look at the 400 scale. Our goal is to look at bringing variety to the 500 scale. And that's something that we're getting there. We're finally catching up on a lot of things that have been, you notice all the late items. And as soon as we've now caught up, we can bring more variety. And that's what we're looking at. And the 400 scale, if we're talking about healthy and not healthy scales, without getting too much in detail about that, I don't think the 400 scale is healthy. If you talk to many retailers, also on that from their perspective, it's just way too much. It's just swamping the market. You have multiple parallel releases. You have quantities going down dramatically. It's great at the moment for collectors because you can choose. You have probably 4 companies doing the same model, so you can choose whatever you like to. But our focus really is, to bring up the variety in the 500 scale, make that attractive for you, and that's our job.
So I think some really interesting points here. I find it interesting that he does try to touch upon both sides, both basically from the manufacturer and then the customer. And I think it's an interesting aspect to bring in that, yes, at the moment, being a scale 400 collector must be quite nice because you do have a huge variety. I don't know if retailers are annoyed about it. I have no idea. But it is, of course, true that it is a very, very competitive market in scale 400, much more than in scale 500. I think the truth lies somewhere in between. I do believe that the scale 400 market is being oversaturated, and it perhaps is a bubble that will burst at some point. Perhaps a bit like we actually saw with the scale 500 market in the first decade of the 2000s. I guess that was also pretty much an oversaturated market. We had too many companies making stuff, and today we only have Herpa. And that's, of course, then the other side, which is also not good for the market if you only have one company making a product and releasing it, because we can see it from Herpa. He did say earlier that they have now learned from or done their homework. I very much look forward to seeing the results of that. I still have my doubts, but I'm happy to be surprised. So I think really interesting here. And I guess my final point on this is just I would wish that collectors, regardless of what scales, would do more to lift each other's spirits up rather than always, oh, I'm the wise guy. I know the one and only truth, and this is the only scale you should collect because all other scales are stupid. I don't really get that point. I think it's getting a little bit tiring, to be honest. But okay, hey, now I'm just ranting about stuff. So yeah, what do I know? But we did have another 2 really interesting questions where we got some, I guess, interesting answers as well. The first one was actually on the process of how does Herpa decide what models to make. And let's listen to what the Herpa Wings product manager had to say about that.
Aside from things like airline requests, how do you decide which models get produced? Is there a team that brainstorms ideas, Or is it mostly the product manager that takes the lead?
Well, actually, the least ideas come from the airlines themselves. That changed a lot. In the beginning, that was the case. But actually, most ideas come from you, come from the feedback we get. Of course, come from us looking what is out there, what is flying out there, what are we missing out on? Are there any new airlines? Is there something that we haven't done so far? A model that we're missing maybe in a fleet? So there's a lot of different angles to look at it until things finally come together. Of course, we in the end have to say, we'd love to do this. Is it feasible or not? I mean, that's also, of course, the last big step that we have to take and have to decide. But in order to decide which models are done, we need your feedback. We need to see, or we see also from past sales what went well. We also see maybe a few models that say, okay, we expected more of that. Maybe we'll not do another model of that airline, maybe shift our focus somewhere else. So a lot of things that go into it.
All right. So I guess keep on giving them your feedback. I mean, in any case, I know many of you do, and we should continue to do so if we want to improve things. And hopefully they will. I guess the question is not so much taking the feedback in, it's more, seeing the results of that feedback. And I think that's where Herpa maybe struggles, because it always takes way too long and way too little. Maybe since they said they have done their homework now, maybe we can see an improvement in the coming years. I would very much hope so. And then the final point was a question regarding prices. Now, I actually did an interview with Mr. Stefan Kürgen during the recent Amsterdam Aviation Collectors Fair. If you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend you to check that out. We talk about a lot of these pressing issues that we have in Scale 500 at the moment. But he did also briefly answer here on the issue of pricing. So let's hear what he had to say this time around.
Will the prices explode further?
I'm looking for my crystal ball, but no. I mean, there's the prices going up has had many factors, not just the model market, but I think in everybody's life, everyday life. We'd like to have it differently, and we'd like to have our prices much lower, because then we could sell more. Just saying it bluntly. But it is what it is. We have to live with the situation. Where costs all over are going up. We have the licensing, we have logistics issue, we have all these factors that go into the pricing of a product, and it's certainly not that we're living here and have huge BMWs and Rolls Royce in front of the company. It's just a necessity, and a cost explosion is definitely not something that we're planning. And if we have any influence on it, we'll keep prices stable as long as possible as we can.
I would take from that we should expect, at least for the moment, stable prices. I do very much look forward to that. We kind of did see that in the last batch. There were some minor adjustments for specific models, but I think overall it was kind of stable. But we will keep our eyes peeled on the future release announcements and see how the prices are developing from Herpa Wings. But I've said it many times before, so I don't want to bore you here, but I think they're not doing themselves a favor with the current price level, and if they were to increase it, they would just, dig their own graves, basically, because they are driving away customers in droves to other scales, or just entirely away from the hobby altogether. So hopefully we can get to more reasonable levels at some point. Perhaps if a competitor at some point steps in, that will force them to do better. At the moment they are quite comfortable where they are, so they can just have these prices and they are not forced to do something about it. That's at least my opinion. Now, let's go to all the models that were mentioned, that were asked about, and that we got some answers as well from the Herpa Wings product manager. Now, one pressing issue here is, of course, the announced A320, I do believe it's a NEO, but in any case, I think it is a CEO, the new A320 of Discover Airlines. The sample model had no mask, however, the livery of Discover Airlines on the A320 at least all have masks. He had a sample model on his table, which we couldn't see because, let's face it, the models are way too tiny, and with that camera angle you cannot really see anything. But he did show, or at least look after himself, the model, and checked it will have a black mask. So it is just the sample model that they presented the first time around that did not have it, but the final product should have it. So that's, I think, good news. There was also a question about CSA. That's always there, and it has to be like that. It was asked about the A319, which I don't know why we always get the A320s from them, and we just didn't get the A319. It's really annoying, but we will not see an A319 CSA model, at least not anytime soon. However, he did say they're working on something else of CSA, and in my opinion, that can only mean the A220 would make sense as well. And also quite exciting, they seem to be working on something from Smartwings, of course, the parent company of CSA nowadays. So probably a MAX. I think that's more likely than the 737-800 because they already done that in the past. Then there was a question regarding the Binter E2, and he did confirm it for scale 200. I don't think that's a huge surprise, but he did also once again confirm it for scale 500, and they're working on it basically, but he did kind of allude to that it is more or less planned for later this year, end of the year, and that there will be more E2 and Embraer releases in general. So hopefully we will get the Embraer E2 of Binter this year. That's at least, as I say, what he alluded to in this live stream. There was also a general question about more ATR releases, and the short answer here is that, of course, there will be more ATR releases. However, it has a lower priority compared to other aircraft types. Smaller regional aircraft seem to be lower priority for Herpa wings than perhaps wide bodies. But there will be more ATRs, but it's never going to be the most released aircraft type from Herpa wings. There were some questions regarding Finnair, specifically the A320 and A330. He did not really answer the specific requests, but he did say that they're working on a new agreement. Apparently, the current agreement they have with Finnair is running out, so they need to renew that, and they're working on that at the moment. So I guess just in time releasing the Finnair ATR. But yeah, I guess what it really means is don't expect any new Finnair models for some time, because again, if they need to make a new agreement, and we know how efficient Herpa is with that, then I would not expect new Finnair releases anytime soon. There was also a question regarding COMAC, the Chinese aircraft manufacturer, of course, starting to make the C919, I do believe it is called. And they were asked about if they are going to feature any COMAC aircraft in the future. His hesitation about that was basically that these aircraft are currently, I think, pretty much only sold to Chinese carriers. So that's, I don't think Herpa sees a huge selling potential in these kind of models. So I guess it's more a question of if these COMAC aircraft are being sold to also airlines from other parts of the world. That would perhaps change the selling potential for Herpa wings for these kind of models. So it's not something they're ruling out for the future, but again, not something they're working on currently. Then there were quite a few more questions about a whole lot of aircraft models. So let me just pick out some of these more perhaps interesting, at least in my opinion. But again, the full list of the models that were asked about and answered about, you can find in the video description below. Now, he was asked about a whole bunch of airlines like Sky Express, ETF, High Sky, Eva Air, Korean Air. Some of them he answered, some of them he didn't answer because he got the questions in bulk, so he just picked out some of these airlines. But it's quite interesting, he for the very first time actually mentioned that they are in contact with ETF airlines, or airways, I don't know if it's airlines or airways, doesn't matter, ETF, they are apparently in contact with the airline, which is something we have never heard about before. So perhaps an ETF aircraft at some point in the future. And in terms of Korean Air, there was also some quite interesting news here, because in the past it had always been no, Korean Air is impossible. It sounded very much different this time. They are apparently now in talks with the airline, but what they are landing is basically, I guess, pretty much the same agreement that they have with Singapore Airlines. Herpa makes a bunch of Singapore Airlines models, but they never enter the retail market because they only make these models for the airline themselves. They then sell them in their online shop or as in-flight products. And this is apparently where we will be landing with Korean Air as well. So they are talking with the airline. They don't have an agreement yet, but it sounded for me like they are optimistic about getting an agreement. But as he said, it 99% sure that it won't be for retail, which can only mean in-flight sales, perhaps an online store of Korean Air itself, where we can then hopefully maybe buy it through. But let's see what happens in the future. Then there was also, again, a whole lot of questions. JetBlue, Allegiant, Azul. That was JetBlue maybe, Allegiant not right now, and Azul was a yes. So let's see what they're coming up with there. Then there was again a whole bulk of airline requests. Asiana, Singapore Airlines, Cathay, China Eastern, JAL, ANA. I think Asiana is still something they are working on. They have a license and they have always had, I think, good relations with that airline. Singapore Airlines, they will continue to make these in-flight models. The same thing goes for Cathay. They're making their in-flight models. China Eastern was a no. Japan Airlines was interesting because apparently they now have a new contact to that airline. Again, it doesn't mean that we will see any new models from them in the next 6 months. That's very unlikely, but the fact that they are now stating that they have contact with the airline is new, and I think could perhaps lead to something. They did very many JAL models in the past, so perhaps they can do so again in the future. And ANA was a no, so yeah, no ANA models. But if you are looking for, actually, by the way, yeah, ANA or Japan Airlines models, even Singapore Airlines has been featured now by F-Toys. Which is a company from Japan. They make scale 500 plastic models, but quite nicely detailed. I have a bunch of them, which I will be reviewing on my channel at some point here in the future. But that could be a nice alternative for collectors if you really want to have them. Or, of course, revert to having custom models either made by yourself or by someone who's really good at it. Not that you are not good at it, but yeah, you know what I mean. And then, not to make this video too long, let me just very quickly also take a look at it. So we have had the issue of Air India, or the topic of Air India, quite a few times in the past as well. Of course, people are waiting for the A350. They seemed more optimistic in previous live streams, but they are in contact. And I think they want to make a whole bunch of Air India models, not just the A350. But at the moment, it seems like a little bit up and down with their contact with the airline. So yeah, I guess it's a question of time, but let's see what happens. Unfortunately, there's no news regarding Wizz Air, except what I heard at the Amsterdam fair is the fact that actually when Herpa firstly announced the A320 of Wizz Air, was a huge success, of course, and at that time they actually said they want to do all the aircraft types they have, so the A320, A320neo, 21 and 21neo. And so far we've only seen the A320. Now it seems like they have lost their contact with Wizz Air. So the person they had in contact, had a contact with, and that they could make all these arrangements with, apparently is not there yet, or has been moved, whatever. But it just makes the whole process, of course, much more difficult again for them. So they kind of lost their window of opportunity, I think, here, which is quite disappointing. But let's see if they can perhaps re-establish contact with the airline and then deliver on their initial promise. Then there was also a question regarding actually quite a bunch of airlines from Scandinavia, like SAS, like Danish Air Transport, like Jet Time or Sun Class. Now SAS, the answer was quite disappointing. I think the most likely model here will be the A321NEO, which is good, but like the Embraer or CRJ fleet, which we haven't had any Embraer, but the CRJ we of course have in the old colors, but we would like to have it in the new colors as well, and that seemed more unlikely. So yeah, we will see. There will of course at some point come something, but I think it is a question of years rather than months. But however, with that, Jet Time and Sun Class, his response was, we are in contact with 2 of these 3 airlines. So my guess personally is they are in contact with Danish Air Transport and with Sun Class. I think that's the more likely ones, but we will see. However, we will also see if it is actually then going to be in scale 500, or it could also be other scales. So yeah, I mean, the question, the classic question of the Ryanair was there, of course, and there's of course no news here, so do not expect anything there in the near future. Egypt Air A321NEO was asked about, as well as Brussels Airlines, and with Egypt Air it seems to be a matter of time, as he said it. And with Brussels Airlines, they do actually make a lot of products for them, but again, only for in-flight sales and nothing in scale 500. So they're continuing their talks to try to convince them. I don't know why it's so complicated with Brussels Airlines to make a scale 500 model. They're part of the Lufthansa group. They make all the other Lufthansa group airlines, so I don't know. If you are from Belgium, please talk with them. I don't know. I really don't understand why this is so difficult, but okay. The last model I would like to highlight, actually the last two things I would like to highlight is, maybe three even, hey, I throw in a few more things. Anima Wings was asked about, and I do believe they have the A320, and that seems to be an airline that they have loose contacts with, as I said, so let's see. But more exciting or more concrete and much easier for Herpa to do, Swiss and Edelweiss A350s, and yeah, they will of course be, I mean, I think Edelweiss was already announced, so that's a given. But also the Edelweiss A320 has a new livery, and that will be featured at some point as well, for sure. Now, there were many more airlines and models asked about here, and as I said, I have listed it in a comprehensive list down below in the video description where you can check it all out. But that's really all I had for this Instagram live stream from Herpa Wings. Some interesting answers, I think, some really good questions from the audience there. It was annoying that I couldn't see any of the live chat while it was going on, but hey, you managed really well, so again, well done you guys. But that's all for this time. If you like this type of content, please feel free to leave a like. That really does help out the channel. If you're new around here, why not hit subscribe? And with that, thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.